Rick Harrison gets nostalgic after Pawn Stars guest brought vintage toy cars. "I love these." In an unexpected but heartwarming moment on Pawn Stars, Rick Harrison, the seasoned co-owner of the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas, found himself reminiscing about his childhood after a guest brought in a collection of vintage toy cars. Known for his calm demeanor and sharp business acumen, Rick momentarily let down his guard as he flipped through the colorful lineup of miniature vehicles, each one sparking memories from decades past. The episode, which quickly became a fan favorite among longtime viewers, showcased a more sentimental side of Rick, a stark contrast to the sometimes cutthroat negotiations that usually define the show. The guest, a local collector in his 50s, arrived at the pawn shop with a modest wooden box containing over 24 toy cars from the 1960s and 1970s. At first glance, they looked like simple playthings, but it didn't take long for Rick to recognize their significance. "These are Hot Wheels," Rick said, picking up a bright red casting of a classic Chevrolet Impala. He paused for a beat, holding the tiny car in his hand as if weighing not just its value, but its emotional weight. "Man, I loved these when I was a kid." His voice softened, and for a moment, it seemed like he wasn't speaking to the camera or even the guest, but to a younger version of himself. Corey Harrison, Rick's son and co-star, noticed the shift in his dad's tone and exchanged a knowing smile with Austin "Chumley" Russell, who had wandered over from behind the counter. "What do you remember most about them?" Corey asked, prompting Rick to elaborate. "I remember getting them for birthdays, mostly," Rick replied. "My mom would always get me one or two. We didn't have a lot of money back then, so finding one under the tree was a big deal." He chuckled slightly. "And don't even get me started on the track sets. Man, those were the best." The conversation drew in not only his coworkers, but also the guest, who stood quietly listening as Rick shared stories from his youth. It was a rare moment on Pawn Stars where the focus shifted away from appraisal and negotiation, and instead centered on nostalgia and personal connection. The guest, visibly touched by Rick's recollections, explained how he had acquired the collection. "These were my dad's," he said. "He passed away last year, and I've been going through his things. I figured these might be worth something, but honestly, I just wanted someone to appreciate them." Rick nodded solemnly. "That's real," he said. "These things aren't just toys. They're memories. They're pieces of time." As the appraisal continued, Rick carefully examined each car, noting model numbers, casting years, and condition. Some were pristine, still in their original packaging, while others showed signs of wear, evidence of being played with rather than kept as collectibles. "You know," Rick continued, "when we were kids, we didn't care if they got scratched. We raced them off the couch. We buried them in sandboxes. We lived with them." He smiled at Chumley. "You ever do that?" "Oh yeah," Chumley chimed in. "I used to have a whole fleet. My cousin and I used to make parking lots out of shoeboxes and pretend we ran a dealership." Corey laughed. "Sounds like a young you, Dad." Rick smirked. "Yeah, well, maybe he can learn something from that." Back to the guest, Rick began the process of determining the collection's value. While some of the cars were extremely common models, others were rarer editions, including a 1968 custom Camaro and a mint-condition Ford Mustang Boss 302. Together, they formed a small but respectable collection. After checking online auction results and referencing collector price guides, Rick made an offer: $425 for the entire set. The guest, expecting either a much lower or a much higher number, hesitated for a moment before accepting. "That's fair," he said. "It feels good to know someone else is going to enjoy them like we did." Pawn Stars guest brings a cigar box owned by JFK, and Rick Harrison was ready to pay a fortune. In the heart of Las Vegas, nestled among flashing lights and the constant hum of tourists, sits one of the most recognizable pawn shops in the world, the world-famous Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. It's not just a place to hawk your gold chains or old electronics. It's a museum of Americana, a treasure trove of forgotten relics, and the setting for one of television's most enduring reality shows. Pawn Stars *. Over the years, the show has brought viewers face-to-face with everything from rare coins to vintage guitars, Civil War swords to Hollywood memorabilia. But few items have captured the attention of the team quite like a simple wooden box, one allegedly owned by none other than President John F. Kennedy. When a man walked through the doors of the shop carrying what appeared to be an unassuming cigar box, no one could have predicted the historical significance it might hold. The guest, a soft-spoken collector, claimed the box had once belonged to President John F. Kennedy himself. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a modest wooden container used to store cigars, but the details told a different story. Etched into the lid was the presidential seal, and inside were initials, JFK, carved with precision. If authentic, this was more than just a cigar box. It was a piece of American history. Rick Harrison, the sharp-eyed owner of the shop and the de facto historian when it came to valuable oddities, leaned in for a closer look. His son, Corey Big Hoss Harrison, peered over his shoulder, equally intrigued. Chumley, the often clueless but always entertaining employee, hovered nearby, trying to make sense of the situation. "Is this real?" Chumley asked, squinting at the box as if that would help him decipher its authenticity. Rick chuckled. "That's what we're here to find out." The guest explained that the box had been passed down through his family. According to him, it was given to his grandfather by a Secret Service agent who worked during Kennedy's presidency. Whether that part of the story was true remained to be seen, but the box itself was intriguing enough to warrant further investigation. Rick knew that Kennedy memorabilia was highly collectible. Anything associated with the 35th president commanded top dollar, especially in today's market where nostalgia for the Camelot era runs deep. But before he could even begin to consider a price, he needed confirmation. And for that, there was only one person he trusted, the go-to expert on all things historical, the old man, also known as Richard Benjamin Harrison. The elder Harrison, though retired from day-to-day operations, still made appearances whenever something truly special came through the door. Rick placed a call, and within the hour, the old man arrived, cane in hand, eyes twinkling with curiosity. After inspecting the box, he nodded approvingly. "This looks genuine," he said. "Kennedy smoked cigars, and these kinds of boxes were common back then. The carving is consistent with the period, and the seal looks official." Still, they needed more than just a gut feeling. Rick reached out to a historical authentication expert, someone who specialized in presidential artifacts. Within days, the results were in. Carbon dating, seal analysis, and handwriting comparisons all pointed toward the same conclusion. This was indeed a cigar box that had once belonged to President Kennedy. Now the question became how much it was worth. Rick gathered the team in the back office, the cigar box resting on the table between them like a sacred object. He flipped open his laptop and began searching recent auction sales for comparable items. Letters signed by Kennedy routinely sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Photographs with personal inscriptions fetched even more. But a personal item like this, something that had been in his possession, touched by his hands, was extremely rare. "I think we're looking at anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, Rick said, his voice calm but tinged with excitement. Chumley nearly choked on his soda. 100 grand for a box. It's not just a box, Rick replied. It's a piece of history. Corey chimed in. We've got collectors who would kill for something like this. We'd be doing them a favor selling